Okay, so my part of the presentation is I was told to do heirloom plants. Was the suggestion. Plants, that's hard. So it ended up being seeds. So I'm sorry for the people that aren't really. I mean, I will discuss plants, but when you get into it, it's all about seeds. There isn't a whole lot of information out there about just plants. So, but anyway, and of course, any of y'all that know me know I'm all about the books. So I just wanted to real quick show y'all a few books that I have that are in my library, and of course that helped me do this presentation. Of course, Chris, we all know Chris Weisinger, the bulb hunter, and I do a section in this presentation on bulbs. But this is a terrific book on heirloom bulbs if you want any information on bulbs. And then I got this one that I thought was really interesting. This one, and it's very good. It's a pretty good book. It's the new Heirloom Garden. So I thought, well, I'm going to get this because, I mean, you know, we wanted to talk about heirlooms, but we're kind of in a new age. So I thought the two of them could blend very well together. And this is a very good book on it's more about planting your heirloom garden than it was about the actual plants and seeds. It's also has a great section on a cut garden if you're interested in growing cut flowers, which many of the cut flowers that we have are heirlooms. And then if you, yes.
What is who's the author?
Ellen Ecker Ogden, O-G-D-E-N, Ellen, and then Ector is E-C-K-E-R, O-G-D-E-N is her last name. So those of you who really like seeds and kind of don't know of a place to start to buy some heirloom seeds if you're interested in going that direction, I buy most of all my seeds from Will Hay because they're a Texas, yes, because they're a Texas seed company. And if I can at all get, and I'll leave these up here for later if y'all want to come up and look at them, but as many seeds that I can, I do buy from them, and they are so nice. And they actually duplicated my order this year, and I ended up with double seeds. No, they duplicated my order but did not send the seeds out because I told her, had I got the seeds, I would have just saved them for today and gave them away. But they billed me twice for my first order, and no questions asked. I called them up. She refunded my money that day. So, I mean, they're a pleasure to deal with, but I mainly do like them and do plug them because they're a Texas seed company.
Spell that.
W-I-L-L-H-I-T-E.
They're in Poolville?
Yeah,
Close to
Poolville,
Fort
yeah.
Worth? Poolville, close to Fort Worth.
Very nice folks. And then Totally Tomatoes, I do really like this seed catalog. They do have some heirlooms, but they also have hybrids. So anyway, they have an excellent selection of tomatoes if you have a hard time finding a particular variety that you like. And peppers, they do peppers too, but they're an excellent. Baker Creek is another excellent. This is all heirlooms only. They're cattle, and I had a few. I only had 5, but they went quick. But the catalog itself is just gorgeous photography. But this is these are really nice people too. A lot of times they're at the state conference. If we ever have another state conference again that isn't virtual, but this is an excellent seed source, but only heirlooms. That's all that they do. And I don't know how this Johnny's got in there. And Select Seeds is another excellent heirloom variety seed catalog that has a lot of wonderful flowers in it. And I do buy some of my flower seeds from Select Seeds too. So and I'll have some more resources at the end of the program. So anyway, so what we're going to discuss today is heirloom plants / seeds. So 60% of all food in the world originated and was developed by the American Indian. And they have come across a seed called a cave bean seed that was found in a sealed jar in New Mexico. The heirloom seed was around 1,500 years old, and when they tried to germinate it germinated after 1,500 years. They think that it was left there by the Anasazi Indians, and then if you're familiar with Seed Savers Exchange, that's another company that has rescued many hundreds of varieties of American corn, beans, trying to kind of bring, those old varieties back. Okay, when they first asked me to, and I know Noveline's going to love this slide, when they first asked me to do this program too, the first thing I thought of was the Three Sisters. I mean, that's just the first thing you think of. Is anybody here other than Noveline familiar with the Three Sisters? The Three Sisters is an old way of like square foot gardening, you might say. You raised corn, beans, and squash, and they were all planted together, and they supported one another. And they also provided a balanced diet of carbohydrates, protein, and vegetables. So that you planted the corn stalk, grew up tall, the beans, heirloom beans, there were no bush beans, only vine beans. And the beans, the green beans, although they think that you can back me on this, Noveline, they really don't think it was green beans. Don't they think that it was some other type of legume other than like green beans that grew up the...
The Indians primarily waited till they dried.
And then they would go up the stalk, and the squash underneath it would keep the soil moist and keep it shaded. And so therefore they had those three things, and they were just planted in like in a teepee type thing. And also something to kind of consider that I keep running across when I was doing this, another thing to keep in mind, potatoes and corn, due to the hybridization of those, they aren't as nutritious as they once were. And so, corn used to be highly nutritious, and it's not. They have in changing this characteristic or that, they are not as nutritious as that some of these old varieties used to be. Okay, 10 reasons to grow heirloom plants. So, first of all, they're better tasting. The flowers are more fragrant. So, every time that you take a plant and you genetically modify it, you take something away from it. So a lot of times with flowers, it's the scent that goes. You got a longer lasting flower, a prettier flower. Now it's a double when it used to be a single, but you don't have the fragrance anymore. So that's one of the things. Very interesting varieties. And if y'all notice, the seeds that were up on the table, a lot of the varieties that were just on those seed packets were some y'all had never even had seen them before. A lot of vegetables like purple potatoes, different colored carrots and all that. Those, you think of those as new, or there was never a purple carrot. Well, in the heirloom world, yes, there was a purple carrot or a red carrot. Anyway, so they have very interesting varieties, heirloom plants. They produce healthy nectar and pollen for the pollinators. They have a natural tolerance for the regional conditions. Seeds may be saved year after year. Grafted plants come back true. They preserve biodiversity of the food system, and they recreate history through historical gardens. And heirlooms have great names, good stories, and memories. To do heirlooms, you don't have to have a huge plot of land. You know, you can still do heirloom gardening and everything in your however small your garden may be. Just remember that there is a future through heirlooms, and over 85% of the plant world in the past century has been lost. So 85% of our plants are been lost due to, okay, what is an heirloom plant? So what classifies an heirloom plant? Variety that was developed before 1951. So gosh, are you feeling old? I kept wanting to see, oh, it's going to have 30s on there or whatever. When I saw 51, I was like, no.
Why not 251?
I think it has a lot to do with World War II. So, Noveline, do you know any more about that? Why the 1951 would?
I don't. But it's just kind of scary to think that celebrity tomatoes are heirlooms.
Yeah. Seeds that have been passed down through families or groups for generations. There is a clearly defined history of the seed, and also heirlooms are open pollinated. So during 1943, during World War II, there was a labor and transporting shortage, and that's where, you know, people really started doing home gardenings, was during that time, because they couldn't get food and stuff. So and like I said, that's when home gardening really became very popular. Mary Sue's going to take up the part on Victory Gardens, and she's going to do her part on that and she'll tie all that in. But anyway, so just also caution. Don't be charmed by pictures in the seed catalog. Remember, we live in Texas. Not everything is going to grow here, and just beware of that pretty picture in the seed catalog. The next thing, learn to read the text. So read. And today with the internet, you know, if you find something, you know, and seed plant, you see where I'm having trouble with the plant part. I'm trying to interject plants in this. If you want, the information's endless. And I will, like, if I see a new plant or something, I just get on there, put the plant, and does it grow in Texas? Or I'll put Southeast Texas, and a lot of times you'll come up with Dave's Garden when you do that, and you can just scroll down through there, and people on their comments have wonderful suggestions on how to grow plants in Texas. So, and I don't know, is Dave's Garden a Texas website, or is does anybody familiar? But he has a lot of information in the comments. People from Texas comment a lot on there. Take your time and explore your options. So, you know, I mean, gosh, you see this plant and you have to have it. Sometimes it's good to just take a step back, take a breather, and check into it and see, okay, do I really need it? As a rule of thumb, you can just kind of think plants from South Africa do better in Southern California. Plants from the Mediterranean do better in Central Texas. And plants from, And then plants from Central America do better in Florida. So that kind of gives you, you know, if you're wondering, these plants originate, will they grow in Texas? Well, where is it from? And you can kind of figure it out sometimes that way. Okay, saving heirloom seeds are the key to the past, present, and future of our gardens. Seed saving is vital to our food diversity. Okay, so if we're going to talk about heirlooms, we just need to hit real quick on GMO. Does everybody in here pretty well have an idea what GMO is, genetically modified? There's a big controversy out there about this. And GMO organisms are created in a laboratory. And scientists, consumers, and environmental groups have big concerns over the health environmental risk of foods containing GMOs. In genetic modification of food, scientists remove one or more of genes from the DNA of the plant that they want to alter. And then by adding the new genes, hopefully that plant will pick up the new trait. So that's where, you know, when I said a while ago, to get something, sometimes you got to give something up. And so 10 GMO crops right now, there are 10. And corn, which that's all, I'm sure everybody knows that. Soy, cotton, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa, papaya, squash, apples, and potatoes. And those are your vegetables right now that are genetically modified. Okay, now we're just going to go over a few. This was a hard part for me, y'all, because you could go all day long. So I tried to pick 3 or 4 of the most popular vegetables that are an heirloom variety, so you'd kind of get an idea. Okay, green beans. Green beans were an ancient staple crop grown throughout the North and South America. So you have your contender, which that's what we grow. I've always had really good luck with contenders. You have your provider, your Kentucky Wonder, and your rattlesnake. So your contender and provider are bush types, and your Kentucky Wonder and rattlesnake are pole bean types. So does anybody grow any of those? Variety? What variety do you grow, Melinda?
Mike grows the contender.
That we really like the contender.
I did the Kentucky Wonder this last year.
So nobody's done the rattlesnake, or that just seems interesting.
She did rattlesnake.
He did.
The deer and
Oh, okay. What did you think? What did you think about it?
It grew well.
It grew well. And what kind of bean does it? Does it look like a wide flat bean or a long slender bean, or?
It's a long slender bean.
And-
You can pick it young. You can eat it as green, but we mostly get it for dry beans.
For dry beans, okay. Okay, corn. Corn is our native food and one of the oldest crops. They think that it possibly was domesticated in Mexico. The heirloom varieties on that are Damon, KS Super, Reed's Yellow Dent, and Stowell's Evergreen. We quit raising corn, so is anybody growing another heirloom variety possibly? That I just picked these 3 because they were the most popular in the seed catalog that people bought. So does anybody have anything to add to that? I think we grew a hybrid, which was peaches and cream, I think is what we used to grow, but the raccoons. Okay, cucumbers. Cucumbers originated in India or West Asia at least 3,000 years ago. So homemade pickles And national pickling is the one I always grow, and straight 8 was the 3 most popular in the seed catalog. Does anybody else grow another heirloom variety that they would? I highly recommend national pickling. Just kind of a quick, funny little story. A friend of mine's sister-in-law makes the best dill pickles ever there was. And I don't know, I was never really happy with them. So my husband Don told me one day, you need to call up Dolores and you need to find out what variety of cucumbers she's using. Maybe that'll help you in your pickle dilemma. So I had her telephone number from many years ago. Didn't know if it was still any good or not. It was a cell number. I called her up on the phone, and it was a generic message, and I just said, hey, this is Charlene. Dolores, I don't even know if this is your number anymore, but I need to know what variety of pickles do you grow for your dill pickles, and just left the message. About an hour later, this lady calls me and says, hello, I had a message on my machine. This is not Dolores. She no longer has this number, but I'm going to the store with a friend of mine who happens to be the quick pickle queen of this area, and she says, you need to grow national pickle. I mean, how, that just don't happen every day. So I grow the national pickling, and they're good for regular eating cucumbers too. Onions is a very ancient crop, and they also found them in the pyramids when they go inside the pyramids and stuff. They were used as food for laborers. In the South, normally you use short day onions, and Texas early guano, red burgundy, and Unzen early flat. Okay, peppers. Heirloom peppers are more flavorful than modern types and give high yields. Your sweet peppers, California Wonder and Yellow Wonder. I grow California Wonder and have for years and years and have very good luck with it. Normally I don't even look elsewhere, I just grow those. On hot peppers, jalapeno M and jalapeno gargantua. I've always grown jalapeno M and have had very good luck with it. This year I'm trying the gargantua or whatever. I'm just for something different. And I didn't even know they were heirloom when I didn't pay that close attention when I ordered them. I will say this, I got them on seed trays January the 26th, and they have not germinated yet. So everything else that I have planted is germinated, but so sometimes I find jalapeno peppers are slow to germinate. They like it hot just like they are hot. Okay, tomatoes. Thomas Jefferson was the first person to introduce tomatoes to the American gardens. And Arkansas Traveler, Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, and San Marzano. I grow San Marzano. It's a paste tomato. It's a plum. And it is meaty. It is wonderful to make salsa. It's made a huge difference in my salsa making. It's not, my salsa is not as watery. It's more firm, where you can, for years I'm like, why is my salsa never, you can't get it on a chip, you can drink it, but, I don't know, I took a canning class or something somewhere, and it's the variety of tomato. So you need, if you're wanting to make sauce of any kind, you don't want Big Boy, Better Boy, or any of those. You want a meaty tomato. Okay, now we'll talk a little bit about heirloom flowers. This was another tough one for me to do. You know, you just, with the heirloom flowers, again, you're going to have that fragrance. And nothing's better than to walk out into your garden and just be able to smell all the smell all the flowers. Of course, also the pollinators love them too. So, so don't forget about your pollinators. Don't forget also that there are a lot of seeds that release their scent at night. And there are night pollinators that you want come into your garden. So, you know, if you see a plant, I keep saying seeds, I mean plants too. If you know that, the one I absolutely love is night blooming jasmine. And man, those little moth, they look like little hummingbirds. They love that plant right before dark. It'll just be, I'll be covered with those. But remember your night blooming plants too, so that your night pollinators can have some something to pollinate. Bachelor buttons, you know, we all are somewhat familiar with bachelor buttons. They were brought to America in the 17th century. They're also known as the cornflower. They're an easy, hardy annual that often will self-sow. They prefer full sun, and you can just spread the seeds on the ground if you want to. Anybody here grow bachelor buttons? Oh, good. Do you find that they self-sow, or?
We'll get them back here after you just scatter them.
Do you cut them and bring them in the house for cut flowers? You need to do that. I am highly recommend going out and cutting your flowers and bringing them in the house so that you can, anybody that knows me knows if I don't have, I'll buy them to have fresh flowers in my house all the time. So, cosmos. Now, I grew cosmos last year for the first time. They did great. They were a wonderful cut flower and everything, but I lost them in the heat. So they did not make it once it got hot and dry. The Greek word, for the Greek word harmony. They say they're drought tolerant and prefers poor to average soil. They need to be, and this is where I think I went wrong. I did not stake mine, and I'm going to try to do that this year and see if I don't have better luck. They will need to be staked later in the season, and I did see that where they needed to be staked. They need full sun is the key to growing cosmos. So if you've tried them and you haven't had good luck, full sun is the key, and they're a favorite of the pollinators. I also believe that perhaps early on, I believe Bobos may sell cosmos in the plants, I think, in the plant. Last year I grew this variety, this color, and this year I bought it again plus the yellow variety. So, I'm going to just kind of fine tune and see if I don't, but when you bring these in the house, these things last forever in a vase, and they're just gorgeous in the house as a cut flower. So Gonfria is another very popular or old, plant. Long-lasting flowers, fresh or dried. If you remember, you can't even tell if it's dried or not, even when it is. It thrives in heat, in poor soil. At full sun, at least 6 hours. It needs 6 hours of sun, and it's pretty pest-free. Does anybody? I've never grown it. Yeah, I buy them at Hobby Lobby and stuff. Why, I don't know, when I could grow them. So I'm going to try them. I just haven't done it yet. But that's a very, people that grow cut flower gardens that sell them in flea markets and stuff are very big on having this as part of their bouquets.
Ma'am?
Yes.
I was given some seeds of those, and she called them bachelor buttons.
That is why you always make sure you have this Latin name up here, because there are so many different, there are so many different names, because I think of bachelor buttons as the slide before.
Yeah.
And if I can, Yeah, that's what I think of is, that's why you need to always go by the Latin name. If you can't say it, at least try to recognize some of them. I fought the Latin and fought it, and so I was not learning it. I'm not going to do it. And as time goes on, I'm like, okay, you just got to be familiar with the Latin names, or you're going to, what flower you're thinking of, somebody else is thinking of a completely different flower.
Especially with all of our nicknames.
Yes. Yarrow. Does anybody grow yarrow? I know yarrow is very popular, and it's a very good cut flower also. It's native to the northern hemisphere. It's an easy to grow perennial. It grows in full sun. It's also considered an herb, and it's also a favorite of the pollinators, and it comes in different colors. I'm almost positive Bobo's also sells that in the plants also. Just some more common heirloom flowers that I just didn't have room for. Agastache is calendula, cellulosa, echinacea, sunflowers, and zinnias are all other heirlooms that, all the zinnias out there. It's just unbelievable how many varieties of zinnias. And they're another flower that will last for at least 2 weeks, cut inside the house in vases. All right, now we'll move on to, I thought I'm going to include bulbs. So, and the good thing about heirloom bulbs is they survive the drought, the flood, the heat, and the cold. I mean, they survive all. And a bulb is classified as an heirloom bulb if it's been in the American gardens before World War II. So that one is a little older to be an heirloom. Sorry. Okay, once again, where do you even start? This presentation could go on for hours, so y'all may not agree with the ones I picked, but this can just be a start for you to search on your own. But narcissus, paper whites, so they bloom mid-March. The foliage emerges in November. And I thought that this would be a very handy tool for y'all. You're always wondering about the foliage removal. Does it not drive you crazy? And that's why a lot of people won't grow bulbs, because they don't want to deal with the foliage once it starts, once it starts disintegrating. Because your foliage is what's giving the bulb energy to produce next year, the bloom next year. So if you go and cut that too early, you're not going to have blooms next year. So you can remove the foliage. So on a paper white, if it's driving you insane, you can remove the foliage in May, and you can cut it back in May. Soil, it'll grow in any soil. Light, it'll grow in full sun. You can plant it late September through December. And as a cut flower, see, I'm pushing those cut flowers. As a cut flower, it will last 1 week in a vase as a cut flower. Of course, I know y'all probably know you can force them. I have a crystal bowl that I put white rocks in, and I buy paper whites every year and force them for cheeriness in. Normally people do it around Christmas. I personally like for mine to bloom around January, when Christmas is over with and those dull, dreary January days. That's when I like to force my amaryllis and my paper whites, so that they bloom after Christmas. But they make wonderful cut flowers. Hardy amaryllis. They bloom mid-April. The foliage emerges in April. Sometimes it's kind of at the same time. And you remove the foliage after your first freeze. You can remove your foliage. light. They like part sun to full sun. They prefer afternoon shade, but you know, these things right here are these are the, you know, the heirloom ones, not the ones that you're getting, the big bulbs that you're getting at Gardener Supply or Home Depot or whatever that you force bloom for Christmas. I don't think anything will kill them, but anyway, so mine kind of get full sun. So about August or so, my foliage just disintegrates. And I don't worry about it because as soon as spring comes the next year, I can already see just little bitty piece of poking out on mine. No danger of a freeze, and the cut flowers last for 1 week. And we have 2 houses, so I have amaryllis at both houses, which is really kind of neat because at my house, I can leave them in the flower bed to enjoy them. At the other house, I'm constantly cutting them and having bouquets of amaryllis in the house. So that's kind of neat. I don't know if it's worth all the work that you do to keep up 2 houses, but it is kind of neat that I can cut some somewhere else and enjoy them and have them in my flower bed too to enjoy. Oxblood lilies, who out here is that their absolute favorite in mine? I love oxblood lilies. And I have 2 packages as door prizes today. But they bloom mid-September. The foliage emerges October after the bloom, so they're going to come up with no foliage and bloom. You can remove the foliage in May. They prefer part shade to full sun, and you can plant late spring or fall, and the cut flowers last 1 week also on them. They're also known as the schoolhouse lily. They will bloom in the shade. I have mine planted around trees, tree trunks, and in the winter they'll get full sun, which will energize the foliage on the, and so if they get winter sun, you can plant them in the shade, but they will need winter sun. Crinum, you love them or you hate them. It just depends on how you feel about it. They bloom May through September. The foliage emerges in March. You can remove it after the first freeze. Y'all, I go in there and trim my back after they bloom all the time. I mean, those things get wild. And you can plant them anytime after the last freeze, and the cut flower will last 1 week in a vase. So there's 105 species of crinums. They originated in Africa, so you can imagine they're tough critters. And they don't survive outside the southern states. So there are no crinums up north or in the west. They won't survive. So they are definitely a southern state flower. Other more common heirloom bulbs: the red spider lily, the white iris, they call it the cemetery iris, the pink rain lily, the naked lady, are just some of the others that I just get you a bulb book if you. It is so hard to pick
Is only the red spider lily an heirloom, or what about the white spider lily?
I think the white. Chris sells the white one, so I'm going to say it'll say in this book. We can look it up, but. The bulb hunter sells the white one also. So does anybody know, just offhand, if the white one is considered an heirloom? Okay, here's some sources that you can, if you're interested in taking this a little bit further, you can, there's Seed Saver Exchange, Select Seeds, Antique Flowers, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, Baker Creek Heirlooms, and plants. I've seen at these nurseries, I have seen these plants at various times. Maybe not, there may just be a quick season for them, I don't know. but you might can find them at Antique Rose Emporium, Blue Moon Nursery, Arbor Gate, and Kim's Nursery there in Huntsville. Does anybody have another that sells heirloom or native plant nursery to add to that list? And then, always in mind with the quote, an heirloom garden is an opportunity to plant a piece of history that provides a deeper connection to the food you eat, the people you love, and the landscape that surrounds your home. And that was a quote out of this book right here, out of the heirloom, the lady that wrote this book. And that's all I've got. I'll take questions if...
Okay, and I wondered why whoever chose these topics tried to put them together. But the victory gardens that I'm going to talk about could never have happened had it not been for heirloom seeds and plants. Because before the victory gardens happened, we didn't have localized nurseries. I didn't know till one time I was at Master Gardener conference or something. Do you know when local nurseries began to develop? Not commercial, but local ones. After World War II. Do you know why? What was left over in the way of containers after World War II? Aluminum cans, big ones. So a lot of plants were started there, and some nurseries started with those containers that were left over after World War II. So that was kind of the start of our local nurseries. There were already commercial nurseries, but that's the start there. But I just kept battling this topic, victory gardens. So finally, my best source for me is reading. I think we can learn so much about what's happened in the past when we read literature. So I've read a lot of books about victory gardens, with victory gardens in them. I have some I will share with you at the end, but victory gardens are re-emerging, as we're going to talk about. So let me see if I can get this to go forward here. Which one, Richard?
You're there.
There I am. Okay, so I decided we would talk about yesterday's victory gardens, that's in the past, what's happening today, and what's happening tomorrow. I want to go back to this one. This is a picture of one of my neighbor's gardens, and she's here today. She has a huge garden that she shares with us, that they'll see several. But we have the past, the present, and the future of victory gardens. So victory gardens were first planted in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia during both World Wars, and have continued today. It's really interesting to find some of the old posters that are on the internet. I just would enjoy looking at all of them that would encourage people to grow. The gardens were used along with rationing cards and stamps and helped to prevent food shortages and freed up the commercial crops so they could feed the soldiers and the troops. And this is some pictures of yesterday's gardens. In World War I, there was a severe food shortage in Europe. And agricultural workers were not available. Why? They were fighting. Yeah, and so the farms became battlefields also. So the burden of feeding millions of starving people fell to who? The United States. Yes, you still feed the world. Just weeks before the United States entered the war in 1907, Charles Lathrop, Lathrop, organized the National War Garden Commission to encourage Americans to contribute to the war effort, by planting, fertilizing, harvesting, and storing their own fruits and vegetables. And this is kind of the result of that. In 1917, there were 30 million new garden plots. By 1918, a year later, We had 5.2 million gardens cultivated, an estimated 1.45 million quarts of canned fruits and vegetables. I read a story in something I was reading about, of course, gasoline was rationed in both wars, but there was a woman in New York, and she had a cousin who lived a short distance away, had a farm. Well, they would not, she petitioned the commission to get extra gas to go bring produce back to the people in New York. So there's all kinds of stories. They're interesting to read, but this is one of the victory gardens. The campaign promoted home gardens. It dropped off after World War I, of course. And now, what comes next in history? All right, our Second World War. And the stories we read about England are heartbreaking. The ones about France, too, when they were invaded by Germany, are really heartbreaking. But England was almost devastated before the United States entered the war. France had already surrendered to Germany, and England was being constantly bombed and bombarded, especially London, especially at night, and that's when they put the black curtains up, and that's where the black curtains came to the United States later for blackouts, that some of you may remember that they were in a building that I taught in Pasadena years later. Why they were still there, but they were still there. But the blackout curtains were there. They came from England. And of course, what was the goal of the Third Reich for England? Like most sieges, what is it? Starve them out. You're going to starve them out. It happened, and you read the stories in the Bible about the Assyrian attacks on Israel. It's always a siege, and it's to destroy the food chain. Sound iffy or wonderful right now about food chain? It does. But the male population was again enlisted to enter the war, especially those in agricultural production. So then you see this one right here. Where is my... Anyway, the one in the middle, it says, join the Women's Land Army. We never had this in the United States, but there are all kinds of stories about it in England. The men were in the army, and England, and a lot of there was food to be harvested in the gardens, no men to do it. So they had established the Women's Land Army. And a lot of them volunteered for this. They were also ambulance drivers, mechanics on airplanes, all kinds of work they did. It's the start of women being active in other than just being at home. But they were recruited. And later, as the war got worse, as Germany began closer to come into England, they were actually conscripted, just like a draft for the men. The women were conscripted also.
For the land army?
For the land army, yes. Or for volunteering to learn to drive ambulances and all kinds of things like that, because there were no men to do it. So they were actually drafted or conscripted at that time. And they also went in, they learned to do things that some of these women had never done. They went into places that were manors or estates and learned to develop their gardens that were once formal gardens now became, guess what? Vegetable gardens and fruit. The formal gardens were taken over. That's why some of them it took a long time to restore those that were in England that were destroyed during this time. They learned to do a lot of things in World War II. What did we call the ones who went into industry in the United States, the women in World War II?
Rosie the Riveter.
Rosie Riveters. I had a grandmother who was one. It became very difficult to stay here in Leon County and live adequately, so they moved to Pasadena and she went to work for Shell Oil. She worked during the rest of the war and until she retired in 1965. So she was a Rosie Riveter too, but that's what they were called here as well.
Mary Sue,
Yes.
I've read a book about the Women's Land Army during World War II. It's called The Victory Garden by Reeves Bowen.
I have that as a door prize over here.
I
I have it as a door prize over here. Because I read it, it's gently used. It's gently used, but I have it as a door prize over here. That's one of my favorites. One of the other ones I've been reading recently is called The Last Garden in England. It's a newer book than that one, but it goes from World War I, World War II, and the present time. And you have having people who are working in the gardens from that time. It's been an interesting one too. But as I said, literature just tells us a lot. All right, and here are some of the things that happen in the Victory Gardens here. We were drawn into with Victory Garden. It reemerged, and once again, commercial crops were diverted to military overseas, and toward moving and transportation, as Charlene mentioned, was used to transport troops and food. So then we had rationing was introduced again, and stamps were introduced with the incentive to grow your own fruits and vegetables. Of course, if we had lived here, and as Charlene and I know, in generations past, we were basically an agricultural community. It's changing, which is good, but we all have stories. And I have one, whether it's this slide or the next one.
Mary Sue,
Yeah.
before you start your story, you think it would help me with my garden if I wear a tie?
I don't know, Tom, you might try it, but they might think you're one of Carol's scarecrows. Somebody else had another comment? I'm more familiar with my family's history that comes from down on 1119, the Pleasant Ridge community. And the stories that I was told from there by my parents and my grandparents was that things were pretty rough even here. There were rationing. They tell one story about gasoline was so rationed that my dad and two other young men from that community were stationed in El Paso, somewhere out there, and they couldn't get together and drive, so they got enough gasoline for two people from two families and loaded in pickup trucks and went to visit them because they knew them, they were fixing to be shipped overseas. So they did a lot of things like that. Not only did they do those things, and Carlene's dad probably knows this history, that community did a lot, learned from the Department of Agriculture. They trained people how to preserve food and how to do it safely. And Middleton Mall.
There was a community cannery there.
Yes.
It was always busy.
Always busy.
There by the old store.
Yes.
Cannery.
And that community did those kind of things. They also had a co-op that they would share their own meat. It would be your turn this month to donate beef, and they would butcher it and divide it up. It's co-op. Or they would do pork or whatever was available. They would share, and that was called co-op. And that happened, I don't know if it happened in other communities, but I do know it happened there. Then Middleton and Pleasant Ridge community. And food began to preserve a lot. And look at the difference between 1942 and 1943 about how many pressure cookers were sold. And of course, some of you recognize the water bath cooker too. So. Oh yeah, all of them. And here's what plants were usually grown in Victory Garden. Looks familiar about what you would grow in a vegetable garden now. Not much different. And this publication is interesting. It's an old one, and I have a 21st century edition of it, but this is in it. These pamphlets were published in the 1940s and sent out to help people not just in urban, rural areas, but urban areas know how to plant. Cozy Taylor shared with me when I was talking to her about it that she remembers growing up in Houston, and they had a Victory Garden in their backyard, so did every neighbor, that they had a Victory Garden, and she remembers that. So throughout both World Wars, the Victory Garden campaign served as a successful means of boosting morale and how to express your patriotism, safeguarding food shortages, and easing the burden on the commercial farmers who worked arduously to feed the troops. But, come on, go ahead to the next one. I found this one. It's an old one. It's kind of funny. But if you were to receive one of those pamphlets, here's the first paragraph. The first thing says, you must have a garden this summer. You may not be able to carry a gun or drive a tank, but you can grow food for victory. The scarcity of food is no longer something that may happen. It is here right now. Canned, dried, and frozen vegetables have been rationed. Some experts estimate that we will receive about 70% of the amount that we had last year. This was in 1942. Why not raise your own? Have as many of them as you want. Have the finest tasting vegetables a king could have, gathered fresh from your own garden. And that was the first paragraph in that. So it's just kind of interesting what's happened in our past. But this is the success of the Victory Gardens during World War II. In 1 year's time, with that much propaganda, those things happened. And how to do it. And this is interesting that these are the ones that I have found that still remain in the United States. This is a picture of Fenway Park. And the people who have, the volunteers who have preserved this garden at Fenway Park celebrate their first tomato like they do the first pitch. So that's still around. There's still some around. These have remained, which is very interesting. Leave it to Bostonians to know how to celebrate. Okay, back one. And this is what might happen in today's Victory Gardens. The picture on the left is where some vacant lots in cities may have been converted to community gardens to be used within the urban area. In the middle is my little garden. Since I can't work one in the yard so much, or out in the field, this is a Victory Garden for senior adults. So I like growing my lettuce and radishes and spinach. It does really well. Mine's a little bit shaded. Now the other pictures come from Diana's garden again. And where Diana raises her garden is amazing. She lives on red land. And what kind of soil's out there? Red clay. So how does she do it? Diana, you want to tell your secret? Yes. How many loaves have Don brought already this year?
7. So about 7 yards per. We had 7 loaves, so 49.
So there are ways on soil that's not productive to make it work. And she's had beautiful success with her gardens. So we can still do this. And we need to have leftover share. I know when I worked the food pantry at Leona, it was always such a blessing for somebody to come in and say, I have this extra, can you give it out? Of course, they're so excited to get fresh vegetables. That's just the thing that does not always happen. So it's a scarcity, and that's where you can share. But they can be in private areas. We have a JMG garden at the school, don't we?
There's a small community garden in front of Scott White Hospital in College Station.
You know who's organized it?
No, I know, but it's there, I saw it.
So that's, community gardens are a way that can happen, or your own. Now these pictures are also from Diana's garden. The first one is my great nephew, and he's 4, and he's learning to peel the eggplant that Diana grew. And the next one is Diana showing another one of my great nephews how to open the peas. And then the other one, they're picking tomatoes, and the last one is, I think Diana couldn't pick enough strawberries for Joseph that day. So there's a way of sharing gardening with the future preserve people being interested in eating fresh food, where it comes from. These children's mothers real interesting. You read about, you know things are changing and these things are beginning to emerge again today. When you hear about the city of Austin no longer always just has a home and garden tour, but they have a chicken cook tour. And then you hear strange things about even my niece who lives in Bay City. That's her child, the first one. And they have decided they don't want to mow the yard in the back anymore. They have a huge old house in Bay City on a corner lot. She now has 2 midget goats. The process is to learn for them to produce milk and her to have milk. Well, the children, she has 3. And William's job every morning is to go out and scoop up the poop on the porch, on the deck in the back. But they wondered what to do with it. Well, she's found a person who will buy it from him. So she's for fertilizer. So it's interesting what can happen today with gardens today.
This is Rachel.
That's Rachel. That's Rachel. Of course it's Rachel. Yes, it's Rachel. She wants her children to experience everything. I lost it. Oh, Diana, another thing. I even had fresh corn at Thanksgiving from Diana's garden. Oh, wow, it was good. And then there are other types to have victory gardens today. There's rooftop gardens, and we read a lot about that in some of the cities and see that happening. And there's keyhole gardens, and we mentioned that a little bit, Charlene did. And then square foot gardens, and I think Richard said this is kind of how he started gardening, was the square foot gardening. But there's other ways. But hydroponic gardening is a thing that has really come. There is even one that's a demonstration in the horticulture building at A&M. And then this is the most futuristic picture I could find about tomorrow's victory gardens. What's going to happen tomorrow? There's always going to be a need for food. So we'll still have to find ways to produce with a growing population. So I think this is one thing that we know that's happening here and very close to us. And I think this happened back in World War II, that campuses of factories and buildings would say, if you will grow a garden, we'll give you a certain plot. So industry and private became together for gardening. But this is Texan by Nature, as you know, that is Laura Bush's foundation. Has the Dewey Prairie Garden that's very close to us. I'll show you. They have, it's to help with food shortages in Limestone, Freestone, and Leon counties. Now, big sponsor, of course, is NRG. And this is its location, if you haven't been out there. Did Debbie Glaze come in yet? Nope, I didn't see her today. I invited her to come today because she's the new manager out there. But this is its site. There's not signage there. I understand that Independence Day, which in Texas is what?
March 2nd.
That's the grand opening. And I don't know who all will be there. Of course, Laura Bush is the founder. I don't know who all will be there. The Rooted In is the man who has that, is the horticultural architect for the gardens out there. So they have that partnership. But this is his location. As you know, if you've been out there before, it started with a lignite mine, and it's been reclaimed. And first they did native grasses, like you see showing on the left, but now there is a 1-acre garden plot out there that's currently there. So I'm going to close because I know some of y'all are anxious to go eat or do something, but I had to share this quote. The greatest generation got to save old tires, dig a victory garden, and forgo sugar. The richest generation is being asked to shop. Now, so what's our challenge? What is our challenge about victory gardens?
Plant one.
We need to plant. And what areas, if we have limited like I do, I can't do a big garden. What are other possibilities for us here to meet this challenge of providing appropriate food for us right now? Okay, we can do container gardens.
Feed tubs.
Feed tubs work really good. Noveline showed us how to do that. You know, we can have container gardens. Another thing we can do is shop locally. How many of you support the farmer's market on Saturday? Please do. I mean, if you want seasonal vegetables and fruits, we have the Saturday farmer's market. There's also a farmer's market there's 2 in Huntsville on Saturday, one on the square and one in the parking lot of where it used to be Penny's out at the mall. There's a farmer's market in Bryan, College Station. But we need to shop locally if you can't grow. How many of you have been to the farm patch?
Yes.
Oh, that's my treat when I go to Bryan. If I have time, I've got to go shop at the farm patch. It's on South College, and they always have fresh produce that's wonderful, and they're really, and good plants too, that's right. So this is a way we can do that we can not be just the generation that shops, but the generation who still makes a difference. We can still do it. Another thing, we need to support Steve and Carol and the Hebners as they grow their fruits and vegetables this year. I think they've already got enough chill hours that they'll have peaches this year, so we're hoping that happens. So we need to support our local growers. And of course, we know we always support Bobos. But this was some interesting reads that I found as Margene, you have you read The Victory Garden? It's a good read. And another one of my favorite though, is the next one, is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society. Oh, it's wonderful. I love that one. And the one I'm reading now is The Last Garden in England, and it's equally good about this time period with the Land Army. And then I have the Victory Garden Guide that has the old stuff, copies of the old stuff in it.